start off with a lilac base. I've gone with this stunning shade. I absolutely love it and it's very fitting. It's actually called lilac, so perfect color to create this design on top. Once you've cured that, apply a layer of matte top coat and cure in the lamp. We want a nice matte surface to work on. It will just make things easier, and also it gives the design a little bit more depth because you've got that matte base, that dull base, whereas the flower looks glass and beautiful and shiny. Prep your brush. So what you want to do is pick up some white gel paint and run it over on a palette. Try not to get it into the metal ferrule bit because it can start kind of breaking down the glue that's in the ferrule and releasing some of the bristles, and we don't want that. So really brush that white through your brush to prep it, and then we're going to work with that brush to create our petals. I know I want to create just one flower, so I'm going to mark out exactly where my petals are going to go. So very gently with your brush, create 5 thin lines that the petals are going to sit on. So these are going to be almost like the middles for your petals. So decide where they're going to sit on the nail and then mark them out. I'm just making sure that they are nice and equal so everything will look nice and cohesive once we're done. Pick up a little bit of the gel, brush it out just so you've got enough on the brush but the brush isn't too saturated, and press it down to create a big petal, or if you want a smaller petal then keep the pressure light on the brush. I am creating 1 petal in the middle and then adding 2 additional tiny ones to the side. That just gives the petal a little bit more of a natural posh look than just your basic daisy flower. When you have a client in front of you, you can't just twist their finger the other way so that you can paint. So I wanted to show you how I create the petals when I need to turn the brush the other way. So I turn my hand the other way. I'm still supporting myself with the pinky and I am pulling the petals out towards the middle, but I have twisted my hand and I am resting it currently on my finger, but if it was a client, I would be resting that on their hand. And that way you can create the petals without having to do any twisting and hurting your neck in the process. I like to just go back in and make sure that all my petals look exactly how I want them to. So really polish them up, make sure that they look the way you want them to. I like to have that 1 point on each petal with the 2 smaller ones on each side. So this is where you could round them off a little bit, create them to be a little bit more rounded, a little bit bigger. So really take your time and create the petals that you want to see. Now I'm going to use a glass brown color. This is actually, I believe, Torty from Hona. So it's a very nice caramel see-through gel paint, and I'm using that to give a little bit of depth to the flower. This is where you're going to add the shadowing on the flower, and at first it's not going to look amazing, but once you put that 3D element on top, it changes the whole look of the flower. So keep that shading a little bit just before the middle of the petal. So you want to brush it out, almost dry brushing it out. You don't want too much color there right now. If you feel like you do need more, you can always go back in and add it where you want it. So I would keep it the most saturated in the middle. So the middle point is where you want that color to be the most saturated, and then it's fading out into the petals. Grab a matte top coat. I'm going with a no wipe formula. Yes, you do still need to wipe it with IPA, but I just like working with no wipe products. I find them a lot more shiny, and when it's matte, I find them a lot more matte. So that's what I've gone for. Cure that in the lamp, and then when you come back, what you want to do is grab yourself a brown color. I've gone for basically the same shade that Torty was, but in a solid creme color. I'm working that through my liner brush, and this is really important. We want nice thin lines because this is what's going to add depth to our flower. This is what's going to make it look a little bit more realistic. Now to add some magic touches to our flower, we want to start adding some lines to the petals. You can start off by outlining just slightly up to where your shading kind of ends with the brown color in your liner, or what you can start doing is just filling it in with tiny little lines. Sometimes if you haven't worked with your liner brush for a little while, it might not be saturated enough, so the color might not be coming off as well as you are expecting it to, so you might have to go back and forth into the gel until you are able to pick up enough to create these lines. I have found that with thin liners, it is always best to drag the brush and have it slightly flatter to the nail than having it almost at an angle of a pen, because the gel polish or the gel paint doesn't flow as well, so you need that almost flat to the nail for it to transfer to the design. So I'm just going to go round and round and create these little lines, and that's going to give us again another layer of depth to this design. You want to create some highlights on top of the petals, so I'm grabbing a little bit of white and just going around each of the little rounded bits on each petal. This is just going to again give it a bit more depth because the color is slightly different. We've put that matte top coat on, so it's slightly raised, and when we put that 3D gel on top of that, everything comes together. So we are looking for that glass flower look. So here is where you would add all your white detailing. I am also going to go in the middle of the flower and start adding some dots, and that's going to be the center of the flower. If you have clients that don't like 3D elements, then you could probably stop here. You can leave it at a 2D flower. It looks gorgeous as it is. So you would just top coat it with either shiny or matte top coat and leave it there, or you could just wipe it if your gel paints are with built-in top coat. But we're going to go in with this Madame Glam 3D gel and a liner. This is a detailer, not a liner, and we're going to start slowly applying the gel like a nice blob around the rounded parts of our petals, and then dragging it down to create like a teardrop shape. Every time you apply a teardrop, you want to make sure they are not touching. So there needs to be a nice thin line between each of them so that they don't just blend into one big blob. If they do, because it can happen, the gel can move. If it self-levels and it moves that way, all you need to do is once you've cured it and it comes out the lamp, just apply another layer on top. So just pop another one on there on top of that one. It's going to give it a bit more depth and a bit more structure and texture, so it can actually look really beautiful like that anyway. But if you keep that little gap between them, then you won't have to do it. Once I'm happy with the blobby bits, let's call them, so the tops of the petals, I go in and start pulling them a little bit closer towards the middle and just making sure that it's nice and thin in that area. Cure that in the lamp, and then once it's out, we're going to go back in with some 3D gel and just add extra texture. I like to add height to each of the middle parts on the petal, and then just maybe fill in a few here and there in the little gaps that we've created. You can do that now because this gel is created to make textured looks, so it's not just going to blob it and turn into a massive mess. It is going to stay exactly where you put it. Cure that in the lamp and you're done. Unless you didn't have a 3D gel, then you might have to top coat this using a detailer. That could make it look a lot more smooth.